Hi, this is Amanda.
And this is Lindsay. We're True Creeps,
where the stories are true
and the creeps are real.
We'll cover stories from grotesque gore
to the possibly plausible paranormal,
to horrifying history,
to tense and terrible true crime,
and everything else that goes bump in the night.
We want you to join us while we creep.
We cover mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everyone. Today, we are coming to you with a special update episode because we have news.
Big news.
Big news. So, for everyone following the Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell case, something crazy happened on May 25th. We're finally seeing murder charges.
So excited about this.
I lost my mind. I was being tagged in it by some of our listeners. I interrupted my husband on a conference call. I was so excited that these kids and, surprise, surprise, Tammy is included in this, maybe getting some justice soon. We're just going to dive right in. So in the beginning of May, we heard that Lindsay Blake, the Fremont County prosecutor, was convening a grand jury in relation to JJ, Tylee, and Tammy's death. This is pretty rare for Idaho, and it's not necessarily required in order to bring charges.
Yeah. So trying the case before a grand jury, it gives the prosecutors the ability to test the strength of your case. It also expedites some procedural steps.
Right. So like I said, on May 25th, Rob Wood announced the indictment and the charges. And the indictment is brought against Lori and Chad, as well as it does name, which I thought was really weird, it names Alex and other co-conspirators too.
Yeah.
Which leaves it open for more people. We're going to get into the exact charges in a moment, but whether the state will be seeking the death penalty has not been announced yet. I've seen death penalty or life.
I'm hoping death penalty. And I don't believe in the death penalty, but I think that they've deserved it. They've earned it.
Right. This is the one case where I'm like, there's enough evidence. I wholeheartedly believe that even if they weren't the ones that killed with their hand, they orchestrated it.
There's people who are bad people, and then there's people who are bad people who make other people bad people. And I think they're the latter.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for how many people listened to them and helped in ways that they maybe didn't know they were helping, but I truly believe that they knew in some way.
Cough, cough, Melanie Gibb. Cough,
exactly.
cough.
Yeah. I don't like her. So
yeah,
this also starts a new case against each of them. So just as a reminder, there are two other cases against Lori currently. One, the Madison County case, which originally had desertion charges, but now just pertains to obstruction of justice, solicitation, and contempt. This case began February of 2020. When we talk about this case, we're going to call it the obstruction case. The second is the first Fremont County case, which is what we've been updating on for the past few months. The charges here are 2 counts of conspiracy to commit destruction, alteration, or concealment of evidence. We'll be calling this one the destruction case going forward. And now we have a new case, which we will be referring to as the murder case. For all detailed introductions to the cases, we will be releasing a Lori Vallow Daybell case primer. We have it in video form on YouTube, but also in a slideshow version on Instagram and Facebook.
Just so we can keep them straight.
Yeah, because now there's just so much. So if you are new to this case, it's a very complicated case because there's a lot of players. So I would recommend that you check out our Sinister Love episode, and that was out in February of this year. And we start from the beginning and we talk about who everyone is, where everything started, who was missing, everything. Our website also has a pretty intense timeline of the events, along with all the key players and descriptions of them, because there are some names that you see multiple times spelled different ways and you're like, which one is it? So it'll help.
And there also are so many people, just so many people involved.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go into and we're going to list the charges. Before we dive into the charges themselves, I do want to talk a little bit about conspiracy. So conspiracy per Idaho Title 18, Chapter 17, Section 1701 is when 2 or more people conspire to commit a crime and at least one person who is conspired completes an act in furtherance of the conspiracy. So here's an example. Say Amanda and I decide that we are going to steal a loaf of bread from my parents' house.
I feel like they'd have something better, though.
Well, we're going real chill crimes, the chillest crime. Would you like to steal a teapot? My mother has tons of teapots.
Teapot sounds way more exciting.
Okay. Revised. Amanda and I decided we were going to steal a teapot when we decided that a loaf of bread would not fetch nearly enough money on the black market. So we begin to talk like, we are going to steal a teapot. We're doing this. It's the two of us.
Co-conspirators.
Dun, dun, dun. So, okay, if I made a copy of a key from my parents' house so that we could break in, that would be an act in furtherance. Similarly, if Amanda acquired a sneaky black outfit for the sole purpose of breaking into the house, that would be an act in furtherance. We'll get to some of the new things that we've learned because in the indictment, they explain overt acts. And overt acts, that's your act in furtherance. So an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. So an interesting thing, too, about conspiracy is that it has to be a conspiracy to commit a crime, which means there has to be an underlying crime. Here, all of the conspiracy counts have to do with first-degree murder.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing a lot in some of the Vallow Facebook groups is people pulling apart one of the Idaho codes and trying to decipher what it truly means in this case. A lot of them now are believing for sure it's poison, where there could be a couple other things to get from the code.
Okay, let's talk about first-degree murder. In Idaho Code, it's Title 18, Chapter 40, Section 18-4003, subsection A. And so I am actually doing a screen recording and I'm showing Amanda, like as I go, how I'm doing this because we're doing a screen recording. We're on Zoom. We're recording. All the things are happening right now. So I'm going to read the statute and then I'm going to kind of break it down on how to read it. So first degree murder is all murder which is perpetrated by means of poison or lying in wait, or torture, when torture is inflicted with the intent to cause suffering, to execute vengeance, to extort something from the victim, or to satisfy some sadistic inclination, or which is perpetrated by any kind of willful, deliberate, and premeditated killing. So let's talk about how to break that down.
A lot of people see that first one and they're not really looking at the or.
Okay, so when you look at a statute and you see or, go ahead and say all murder which is perpetrated by means of... And then let's put it by means of one or more of the following. Put a little colon and then just do a 1. And then, so we're going to do a 1 for poison. And then every time you see an or, you're going to put a number in front of it. So poison or lying in wait, that's number 2. Or torture, where torture is inflicted with the intent to cause suffering, to execute vengeance, to extort something from the victim. And then, or to satisfy some sadistic inclination, or which is premeditated by any kind of willful, deliberate, and premeditated killing. And then it is murder of the first degree. So we have conspiracy charges here, right? So we know that it's premeditated. So I feel pretty confident in being like, well, it's at least number 5, right?
Yeah. And let's read that again. So it says, or which is perpetrated by any kind of willful, deliberate, and premeditated killing. That accurately describes what happened in several of the people involved, right?
Yeah. So it's not to say it couldn't be any of the others as well. And I mean, especially for JJ and Tylee, it's very clear that their murder was not natural, right? We know that from the get. But when you talk about Tammy, if they said natural causes, then they exhumed her body, had to perform an autopsy that took quite a long time, it felt like. So for her, I'm not saying that it couldn't be poison, but we don't know that. It could be any of these in addition to number 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in my heart, I think that they did somehow poison her or, they gave her something to cause what looked like it was natural causes. But that's just my speculation and what I believe. We don't know yet. And that hopefully will be released once the real trial starts.
I don't know about you, but it feels like starting Monday, the 24th, this week has been on warp speed with how much has been going on, particularly with this case.
I think every couple hours I'm messaging you like, oh my gosh, here's this. Oh my gosh, this helps fit this puzzle piece in.
Yeah. That's why we waited a little bit because we wanted to have something that had everything in it as opposed to, oh no, we have to amend that. Oh no, we have to amend that over and over again. So we're going to post this on our social media, this video. I think visually when you break it down as portions, it makes it a little bit easier to say like, oh, it's one of these. Like we're looking at a list. It has to be one of these. It doesn't mean poison specifically.
Yeah. And when we post it, comment what you believe it is.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. So we have charges. And then after that, we're going to talk about all the new things that we learned, because we mentioned it a moment ago. There's an intense timeline with a lot of detail. And now we have more, and the color is vibrant now, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So the first charge is against Chad and Laurie, and it also names Alex, although he's deceased, and says other co-conspirators. And it's conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception. This is for the conspiracy to murder Tylee. The second charge is against Chad and Laurie only, and it's first-degree murder. And that's for the actual murder of Tylee. And so it's interesting because you hear conspiracy to commit the crime and then the crime, and you're like, those are separate? Yes, those are separate. However, you can't be charged with attempted murder and murder, just one or the other, right? Because you either did a thing or didn't.
Yeah, you can't attempt them and murder them.
And it's also a way where, say someone, cough, cough, Melanie Gibb, cough, cough, was aware of things happening, she could have stopped it. She or he. We're not going to name names. She or he could have stopped it. And if they had, then the murder wouldn't have happened. But they still could have charged for the conspiracy.
Right. And then does this also, in your opinion, then help them keep some charges for, let's say, Laurie and Chad, if, let's say, they weren't actually the one to kill Tylee? Let's say it was Alex, or Alex killed JJ. It at least holds them accountable for as much as possible.
Yes, I think is the short answer to that. I think that when you read the indictment, and we're going to get into key facts in a moment, but we don't have a witness who says, here's what happened.
Right.
And because we don't have a witness that says, here's what happened, we don't know exactly, without a doubt, what happened. It's conjecture, and it's putting together a bunch of pieces of a puzzle and going, I think this is the picture. And so it makes sense that they would do conspiracy and murder. So the third charge is conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the murder of JJ. And that's also against Chad, Laurie, Alex, and, quote, other co-conspirators. The fourth charge is first-degree murder for the murder of JJ, and that's against Chad and Laurie. So next, it's the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and that's for the murder of Tammy, and only names Chad and Alex. So I thought it was interesting that Laurie wasn't included in there.
Right. And she was.
Exactly. Next is first-degree murder for the murder of Tammy, and that is against Chad only.
And we'll talk about why that's now believed to just be Chad too in a few minutes. And the seventh is grand theft for Social Security, and that is against Laurie only. 8 is insurance fraud, and it's for Tammy's life map insurance policy, and that's against Chad only. And the last one on there is insurance fraud, and it's for Tammy's Primerica life insurance policy, and that is also against Chad only. So there's a lot of information in the indictment. We're going to go over all the new things that we've learned. So between October 26, 2018 and June 9th of 2020, Chad and Laurie endorsed or espoused religious beliefs to justify/encourage the homicide of JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. It's a big chunk of time.
Yes. And so each of these that we're going to talk about were tied to different counts, but this one in particular was tied to conspiracy. Mm-hmm. And it talks about they were laying the foundation for the people around them to think this was okay.
Right. And next is July 30th, 2019. And it says Chad and Laurie exchanged texts regarding death percentages for Tammy and JJ. What does that mean? And also, Kay and Larry had a chat with Justin Lum of Fox 10, and that was something Kay brought up that she was going to talk to Rob about. So I want to know, what does that even mean? Is it the way that they plan on killing them? Think of poisoning or something like that. Do all people die? Is it a certain amount of, whatever they have to give them? There's so many different things it can mean. And I've been thinking about that all day. So on August 16, 2019, Laurie changed the bank account for Tylee's Social Security benefits from Tylee's bank to Laurie's. So that's premeditated there too.
Yeah, that's weeks.
Yeah. And the reason I think she did that too, not only because obviously it's all about money to her, right? But think of it, when Tylee's missing, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to track her bank account. If they're tracking her bank account, Laurie wouldn't be able to be using that money, so she had to make sure it was coming from her own.
I think it's interesting that her Social Security benefits were going to a different account, because I would imagine that those would be going to life expenses, right? It's not like it's a unique to Tylee expense, she's got rent and a car payment.
Well, I mean, she was an older teenager.
She was, but I believe that was a death benefit from her father.
Yep.
So it's interesting that it wasn't being used in lieu of child support. That's kind of my mentality. That like it was child support adjacent.
Maybe they set it up in an actual nice way for her. It's hard to think about.
I know.
But what if they were like, maybe this should just be Tylee's money? I don't know. I'm sure more will come of it.
For sure.
So September 8th, 2019, Chad and Tammy signed an application to increase the life map insurance to the max that was allowed under her policy. That's wild to me. You know, that both of them signed this, right?
Red flag.
If anyone wanted the max on my life insurance, I'd be like, okay, Lindsay, this person asked for it. They're killing me, right?
You seem awfully healthy. Let's go up that life insurance.
Yeah. And from all accounts, remember, she was in a good state. You know, like she was training. I read for a marathon at one point. So she was pretty healthy. She had just visited her family. There's no reason. She had just visited her family right before she died, and everyone seemed like she was fine. So also, I just want to note, this is the same day that Tylee went to Yellowstone. So I feel like, was he working on 2 murders at once?
I think so.
So on September 8th, 2019, Chad Googled SSW wind and visited a website titled, "What is the definition of SSW wind direction?" And all I could think of is like the only reason you look up wind direction is for burning, right?
I believe so.
Is there any other, or sailing, I guess.
I can't think of any other reason why he would suddenly need to know which way the wind was blowing.
Yeah. But the first thing I was like, when you're lighting a fire, like an intentional fire.
Yeah.
You'd want to know because you don't want it to ignite something else.
Exactly.
That blew my mind. I didn't like that at all.
No.
And I'm wondering if it was not only to like keep something from catching fire, but maybe to make sure it wasn't going directly to his next door neighbors, because behind him there's a big open field, but like there are neighbors too that are kind of close.
Yeah.
So on September 9th, 2019, Alex went to 565 Pioneer Road, apartment 175. So that would have been Lori's apartment. Between September 9th, 2019 and February 1st, 2020, Lori failed or refused to contact with the Social Security Administration to report Tylee's death, which, like, she was doing fraud. Why would she do that, right?
And let's also read between the lines here. They're assuming that that's her date of death, is the 9th. If that's the start date of that timeline, they're assuming that she died that day.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a different date for when we get down to JJ.
That's true. Yeah. And that might be why Alex went to her apartment that day. I honestly always thought it was after Yellowstone. I thought it was that evening.
Still could be.
So I don't know why I always thought it was after Yellowstone, but I guess it's just the last time she was seen alive, which, I mean, that's how it's documented, but I always thought maybe on the way home is when they did it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's 8th or 9th.
Alex Cox went to Lori Vallow's apartment late the night of Yellowstone. So that's why I had it in my head that it was that day. So he was at the apartment between 10:44 p.m. and 11:15 p.m., which I'm assuming JJ was probably asleep by then. And then from all of that, he, runs around for a bit, and he's back and forth between his apartment and Lori's apartment through early hours of the morning. Then he goes to Chad's house around 9:21 in the morning. Ugh, that hurts my heart. Every time I read the pings from his cell phone, I just imagine him just being the most awful human, running around, going to the gas station, doing normal things, and then just like, oh yeah, let me go drop my dead niece off at Chad's house. So on September 18th, 2019, Chad obtained a burner phone.
Super sketch.
And if we remember, Melanie, I believe, had talked about how Lori had multiple cell phones too when she was married to Charles.
Yeah.
So
look, unless you have a phone that's issued by your employer, multiple phones, I am assuming nefarious intent. So on September 25th to January 22nd of 2020, Lori continued to collect Social Security survivor benefits on behalf of Tylee. So she's now also collecting her money. Extra gross. On or about September 23rd of 2019, Alex Cox took possession of JJ.
And that always hurts my heart knowing the story of that weekend.
Yes. Between September 29th of 2019 and February 1st of 2020, Lori failed or refused to contact with the Social Security Administration to report JJ's death. Between the dates of September 9th and February 1st, she was collecting JJ's Social Security benefits on behalf of JJ, and there was Social Security child and care payments that she was receiving as well. And so all 3 of the payments that she was taking relate to the charges just against her in the indictment.
Hurts my heart.
Yeah, just it's all bad. And then you add like she fiscally gained.
Yeah.
It makes me sick to my stomach. So in the months before October, Alex began going to the gun range.
To practice? Ugh.
Right? So between October 8th and October 12th of 2019, Alex conducted internet searches relating to Grendel drop and shooting through a Dodge Dakota.
Does he not think that internet searches are a thing that can be looked at later?
He's never watched a crime drama, clearly.
Seriously. So I was like, well, what is a Grendel drop? And I was like, I figured it had to do something with a gun. And I was like, I am not versed in gun language at all. Kept seeing that it was I think a video game reference for a while. And I was like, no. But anyways, it refers to like the bullet dropping. And it looks like it was a 6.5 Grendel round for a specific rifle. And I found a whole forum about it. And they talk about bullet drop specs.
And when you say that, you mean like when it's traveling a distance, how gravity will begin to pull it down, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So like where you have to be, and like I believe it was a hunting site, and it just made me feel icky even reading about it. But it was like people were able to ask, hey, if I'm at this and I have this gun and I have this type of everything, what do I do? And there was like little maps and everything.
So on October 9th of 2019, Alex Cox obtained a burner phone. Also on the 9th, he went from Sportsman Warehouse to the vicinity of the Daybell residence.
And I wonder when it'll be known what was on his receipt for that purchase.
Yeah. I would venture that it has to be in evidence because, I mean, we're all guessing gun, right? So they would have to have some documentation.
I mean, gun, bullets, whatever he just read on that forum that he was Googling.
Yeah. And so on the night of October 18th, Alex was in the church parking lot that was 2.5 miles from the Daybell residence. And this is the day that Tammy died. And here's my question is, when I read that, I'm assuming that they know that from cell phone.
Yeah, I assume so.
So 2.5 feels like there's wiggle room for error there. So he could be close. He could have gotten picked up, like many a things.
So I don't understand a few things with this. So why was it him and Chad then working together for Tammy? Where was Lori? Did they have like a little team meeting before they did this? And they orchestrated like, you go here, you do this?
I don't think Lori ever got her hands dirty.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think that someone did everything she wanted them to do.
She orchestrated it all.
Yeah. And so those are the charges. And that's the new information that we got from the indictment. So in the indictment, there is a list of witnesses, and then there was an amended witness list that was submitted, and there were 44 witnesses, which is a ton.
Yeah.
A lot of it included names that I wasn't familiar with. Going into it, we went through the entire list. We found everyone but 7. I did some research last night looking at people. I'm like on people's Facebook pages. But so on this list, there were people from law enforcement, including Fremont County Sheriff, the Rexburg Police Department, FBI. There were also forensic experts, associates of Laurie and Chad, some family members, folks who were involved in the Preparing a People movement, school officials, and then folks who work in insurance as well. We've mentioned it before, but we're intensely proud of this list.
Yeah, just like a brief summary, but it helps when you're like, wait a minute, this person hasn't been in the news or this person hasn't been brought up in over a year now.
Yeah. And some of the people, like one person who was named was a real estate agent in Hawaii, who you're like, I don't remember her name.
Yeah, I remember the email, but I don't remember her name.
Oh, and to check out that list, it is truecreeps.com/Daybell.
Chad and Lori's preliminary hearings for the murder case were scheduled on May 26, 2021. Each was separate. And from the interview that Justin Lem had with Kay and Larry this morning, I guess they wanted to be present for the appearance today, them and Colby. And the judge denied that request, which I was like, no, they should have to look at Larry. I know Kay wanted to like stare them down, but for me, it's Larry.
It's all Larry all the time.
Mm-hmm. So for Chad, Judge Edens read the counts and the possible penalties, and that included the possibility of the death penalty or life in prison. Another bit of good news, there's still no bail for Chad.
So excited.
I will say, when I was watching, especially Chad's, right? Chad and Pryor are just sitting there, you know, like the frogs on a log, as usual.
Yeah.
And at one point, you're seeing all the other people in the Zoom meeting move a little bit or like move their head.
Not them.
After it started, I almost felt like it was replaced with a picture because they were moving at the beginning and then they were just stopped. They were paused.
Chad looked like he was smiling because he didn't have a mask on, which I was like, this is weird. I'm uncomfortable.
At the beginning, he did laugh when he was like, "Can you hear me?"
No joy. You don't get any joy in your life.
Kind of an inappropriate. Yeah.
Do not smile again for the rest of your life. It was the first time that we'd seen them in a long time. And I at first wondered whether the preliminary hearings were going to be together.
Mm-hmm.
And I made myself angry in my own head at the thought of them seeing each other.
Yep.
Because one of the things that brings me great joy is thinking that the two of them will never see each other again.
Right. Outside their portal.
Of course, outside their portal. But because, if this was an in-person case, they'd both be in the courtroom. But because it's not, they may never see each other again. And that just brings me like a special kind of joy.
Lindsay just lit up.
I did. I feel just good about it.
Me too.
And look, I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure Lori was smizing.
Oh, yeah. Lori was wearing a mask. And let's talk about this real quick. It's really petty. But her hair?
She's a brunette now.
With some blonde.
Yeah, she kept a few pieces.
She was keeping the Cruella vibe going.
I thought that she just grew it out because she's been in jail for a minute now, but she would have to have like serious growth in her hair.
Yeah, no, I don't think hair grows that fast. I did Google and some jails in prisons allow women to dye their hair.
Okay.
I don't know what their stance is. They're not like a comprehensive list of each one. But yeah, she had a mask on so you couldn't really see her whole face. I wonder. You couldn't really read her face because of the mask and whether it was, for safety reasons or possibly she just didn't want cameras seeing her face. I'm not sure.
I mean, if it was me, I would be like, the less you see, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, except her hair. Her hair was like curled and stuff, right? It looked like kind of like flowy at the front.
She had nice hair. She did have nice hair. So Rob Wood also asked whether Mark Means will be representing Lori, and he confirmed that he will be. Means filed his appearance on May 27th. As far as we're aware, his recent experience is not with criminal law. It seems like he's very set on being a part of Lori's story. Means also filed a discovery request directed at the prosecution. He's looking for information relating to the new charges, evidence, state witnesses, police reports, any recording, documents, and communications. It seemed pretty standard. Chad's arraignment, where he will enter his plea, is scheduled for June 9th.
So regarding what happened on May 25th, Annie Cushing also made a statement, and she did say, "I'm celebrating today's news knowing that we will have a lot ahead of us, but it's just been a jolt of confidence that they can go after Chad and Lori for all of the deaths." I'm like, yes, Annie, I feel the same way.
After hearing about the charges, Tammy Daybell's family, her parents and siblings, released a statement. It's pretty long, so we're not going to read it all now, but it is up on our social media if you did want to read it. They expressed their sympathy to JJ and Tylee's family. They also asked the public to respect their privacy and allow them to grieve, especially in relation to Tammy's kids and grandkids. And I hate that people feel like they actually have to say that because, of course, they should be given space to grieve. They also expressed their gratitude towards law enforcement and thanked folks who have continued to reach out and support them. And they also expressed their gratitude to those who have honored Tammy's legacy through their support of the Tammy Douglas Daybell Foundation.
I already brought this up before, but Justin Lum did interview Larry and Kay Woodcock this morning. And Kay said that for this to come through on JJ's 9th birthday, it was bittersweet. And I should mention, yes, yesterday on the 25th would have been JJ's 9th birthday, where he should have been celebrating with his family and having the cutest little birthday party, but instead his mom was facing murder charges. And I said that out loud to Lindsay yesterday and teared up.
Throughout this, it's fun to poke fun at Lori and Chad, but I still cannot wrap my head around murdering your children generally. But if Lori no longer wanted to be a mother, she had options.
Sure did. She had Kay and Larry would have taken him in a heartbeat. And then that Tylee had really, really strong friendships where if she was like, "Hey, I can't do this."
I don't know Larry and Kay, but I feel like from watching so many things, I have a sense of them.
Yeah.
They seem to, even before them being missing and them being found, they seem to really love Tylee because of the relationship that she had with JJ. Like, they saw what a light she was in his life and how wonderful she was to him. So if Lori was like, hey, I got this new thumb of a man in Idaho that I want to be with. Hey, will you take these kids? I think they would have.
Or she simply could have not murdered Charles. He would have taken him.
Also an option. You know, you're very right.
So during the interview too, Kay and Larry did express that they were more relieved than happy seeing the charges come through. And I was like, this makes me sad because I feel it. I mean, I'm not in their family, but following it and for how much heart and soul I've put into the case, I feel like watching the videos and reading all the little things about Tylee and JJ, like I care about them. So it just made me really sad. So they're still digesting the news. Larry said that it was one of the hardest days he's ever had. And I think it's just, again, it's more real. Like it's on paper that she and her thumb could have killed your boy, as he would say, right? His boy.
My heart.
Mm-hmm.
And my heart is Larry.
So when Justin was talking to Kay and Larry, he asked, what triggered you to put the pressure on law enforcement? And Larry actually mentioned that he started to suspect there was a problem back in 2017 and that his intuition told him that there were problems between Charles and Lori. So that's sad if he was just, hoping everything would get better and then it just got terribly worse.
Yeah, and Larry even talks about the fact that he wants other people in the circle to be held accountable, and same, Larry, same.
Yeah.
He says that he'll never believe that Alex died of natural causes.
Me either, Larry.
Yeah, I mean, like, same page, my guy. In the conversation, I don't know if it was Kay or if it was Justin who, referred to the whole thing as crazy. And Larry got very serious and was like, they're not crazy. And he talks about how this was all premeditated and they knew exactly what they were doing.
He's right.
It's true. And it's very clear from the step-by-step evidence, right? But he was very adamant. He's like, no, they'll be held accountable. And they did both say that they want them to get the death penalty. So going back to them not believing that Alex died of natural causes, Kay mentioned that the date he died is too suspect because of when Tammy was exhumed.
So this was mentioned earlier in the interview with Kay and Larry, but we thought it would be better to discuss this at the end so we could segue into our next section. So Kay said they are 3 out of 4, and next they will be focusing on Charles. And I was like, yes. And just the fact that she's like, all right, we got Tammy in there. Now let's do Charles. And I was just like, yes, Kay, you're right.
Exactly.
So just to pivot away for a second, there is a recording that came out this month too. And it's a recording of Melanie Gibb and a friend of hers, I guess a Facebook friend. And it was from January of 2020. And I believe her name is Sherry. That's what it says on the video that is now posted on YouTube under Vallow Daybell. The original post for it, though, was on a Facebook group, but since then I haven't been able to find the post, so I believe that they have deleted it. There is only, I think it's 22 seconds or something on the video on the Vallow Daybell channel, but it has a lot of writing behind the video, so you may have to watch it, pause it, read what's behind it to get the full story of it. And it was just posted actually 2 days ago, so on the 24th. And the YouTube background says that they had planned Charles's death months before he died. I have not, personally, I'm going to admit it, I haven't heard the whole audio. I've only heard this little snippet because it was deleted so fast when people started talking about it. The audio essentially says that they planned it. And I don't know why Melanie is telling this random person about this. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But it is her voice. You know how she talks. You know how frantic and weird she is. So she's talking about Alex and she says something along the lines of he just wanted to help his sister. He didn't really care about Charles. It was a favor to his sister. And the friend was like, so she asked him to murder him? And she's like, yeah, well, self-defense. And then she kind of jabbered for a second and says they planned it. And so you're like, oh my goodness, this is a thing. And I guess law enforcement already had it a while back. I don't know what prompted this person to post it on a Facebook group. It get leaked and now it's kind of out there still.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say anything that I don't know for sure. Again, who knows if it's Melanie? I believe wholeheartedly it is. It sounds just like her. I don't know who the friend is. I don't know anything about it.
Really weird though.
It's really weird. And when you listen to it, it's just it confirms everything you thought about Melanie. Melanie knows more. There's no way in hell that she was there the weekend that JJ could have died and not known. There's no way.
Exactly.
And she knows what happens to zombies. So her just playing this I didn't know card. I just, my emotion towards her is high.
she's culpable. And also, like, let's just talk about generally a belief system that demonizes children and talks about their eradication.
Nope.
Is not okay. And if you buy into that, then you might be morally reprehensible.
Exactly. Agreed.
So even if we're talking about that belief system, say she didn't know exactly that they were going to hurt the children. If she was hearing like, I think my children are evil and I'm here to eradicate evil, a reasonable person could have put those together that those children were in danger, especially with a body count around Lori.
Yeah. That's why I'm like, she is the co-conspirator that they are talking about.
I think so too.
Yeah, she has to be. I'm sure there's more. She was there at the right time and place. So, like, she's there. I don't know. Okay, moving forward.
Okay, so in August of 2020, Justin Lum reached out to the Chandler Police Department to ask about their investigation into Charles's death. At that point, they said they were close to submitting charges. Well, this week, we found out that the Chandler Police Department finished their investigation into his death. And they've submitted charges against Lori for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Those charges were submitted to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office on April 1st.
So, per Justin Lum, investigators have been working this case since July of 2019, and he was told that the police report has grown to 1,000 pages. Also, remember, this is when Charles died, so July of 2019. Ultimately, it will be the MCAO's decision on whether they file charges.
And we also know from other murder cases that, it's a hard pill. Are you ready? They do not always prosecute when somebody has the death penalty. So if they get the death penalty, they may not prosecute. I don't like it.
Interesting. No, he needs justice just as much.
He deserves justice just as much. And it's not to say that they won't.
I mean, yeah, but...
Now, if they don't get the death penalty, then I think it's possible that they could be charged. But if they do, or if say like some of them do.
Right. We'll see.
So far, we've been talking about the murder case. So now we're going to discuss the destruction case. So Pryor disclosed his expert and lay witnesses as Nate Eaton, who's from East Idaho News, Joe Adriani, who was the Colombo PI we talked about with the surveys, Heather Daybell, which is his sister-in-law, and Andrea Frick.
Have you ever heard of a journalist that just reports news being called in on a case like this?
No, but here is my wild conjecture. What they're being called in for is not the trial of guilt, right? To see whether they're guilty of the charges. They're being asked to come in on the change of venue hearing. I would say that somebody who deals with the community a lot would have a good sense of whether anybody is willing to consider the notion that she is not guilty. I think he might have an interesting perspective as an expert on the community. So like think about it like a community leader like that. Here's what Nate Eaton's attorney said in response to this. News reporters should not be conscripted as witnesses for either side in a criminal case, particularly in a case of such enormous public interest and concern. The First Amendment protects the independence of the press so it can report on criminal cases and not be forced to become witnesses in them. We hope the defense will reconsider this course and withdraw the subpoena. If not, we ask the court to squash the subpoena. I just think it's an interesting maneuver. Not surprisingly, Nate Eaton posted on May 29th that the subpoena was withdrawn. So Mark Means also filed a motion for Lori to be considered indigent, and a subsequent order was filed on May 21st. And so what that means is, per Idaho code, is that she has a limited ability to pay for legal services such as a defense attorney or investigative or expert fees, and that the state will help. But Mark Means confirmed he will continue to represent her. So I think that's interesting because generally you would get a public defender appointed to you. So the fact that she's like, but I want my attorney, is interesting. So I wonder kind of what they're using that for.
Well, like if she had to change to a public defender, wouldn't they have to like come up to speed all over again?
They absolutely would. But one grounds for appeal is if your attorney is inept. So it behooves the court to not have someone who's inept. That's all to say that if it's to keep things moving along because they don't want a public defender to have to get up to speed, it's just going to throw a wrench either way. So Mark Means was on fire this month. Interesting things he did. A subpoena was served on Melanie Gibb on May 21st, but she refused to take the document from the process server's hand.
She's like, if I don't take it, it doesn't exist.
I'm pretty sure that's what she thought. And it still counts because, like, if they find you and you choose not to take it, that's on you, baby. And so it was a really intense subpoena that was filed by Mark Means. Do you remember many moons ago, we were talking about really broad discovery requests that the defense served on the prosecution when they were like, all of this thing and all of that thing?
Like a giant list.
They're at it again, but it's with Melanie Gibb. And so, oh my gosh, the thing is very long and very broad. I'm not going to read it to you. I'm going to give you broad strokes of what it is. So everything I'm going to say in a moment is from January 1st of 2018 on. It kind of goes back and forth between January 1st, 2018 and January 1st, 2019. So I'm going to talk about it as the earlier date. So basically what he's looking to be able to inspect and look at or copy are the following things. Any communications that she had with anyone relating to the case, and we'll talk a minute about that list, but law enforcement and the media, all information on her travel, whether it be via car or any other means. They want access to all of her electronics that she's had or the location of where they may be if they've been sold or given away. They want to be able to log into all of her social media accounts. And if they can't, they want to be able to get like printed out records. They want to see her telephone records, and they also want to know all the phone numbers she's had, all the phones she's had. And then I want to think that they wanted her to identify like who some of the people were as well. They also want all ebooks, publications, and appearances. And they name several organizations, but it seems like they're all related to her faith-based outreach. It's kind of under that umbrella. And then they want her unedited podcast. And I literally typed in all caps in our outline, the horror underneath.
Can't even imagine. We're unedited.
No, just our unedited, pure, unadulterated Lindsay and Amanda, us breathing, just so much breathing. We breathe so much into these microphones, and we work so hard for you to not know that we breathe.
We breathe, guys.
But anywho, and so the list of folks related to the case where they want all the communications for, it's over 40 individuals and organizations. It's massive. So this massive subpoena, by the way, is all due to Mark Means' office by June 1st, which is an insane deadline for this amount of materials.
It absolutely is. And it's just because they want everything. Like, she's not going to be able to do it. So they're going to be like, okay, just hand us everything. So when Lindsay was just talking about the list, Justin Lum posted a screenshot from a while ago. It was actually an email that Chad had sent to Lori back in January of 2019, because some of those people that were listed on the document are also in Chad's email, including Melanie Gibb, Jason Mao, and Thor Furseth. And it's a document that kind of lays out, remember, they thought of multiple probations, right? And it's their probations, I guess, before now. So kind of their past lives. And funny enough, we were just talking, Lindsay and I, about past lives on an episode that's upcoming. So it's just interesting. But if you want to check that out, head to Justin Lum's Facebook page. He is a wonderful reporter.
So moving along, a subpoena for materials was issued to the Madison County Sheriff's Department. The subpoena was looking for records and information that had been given to the media. He also had provided highlighted quotes from an article. He wanted a list of everyone employed at the Madison County Sheriff's Department with their badge and any communication between Madison County and Fremont County's prosecutor's office and their agents, as well as all media companies, including Dateline, MSNBC, and 2020. So a bit ago, we were talking about Lori Vallow's preliminary hearing for the murder charges and how it was continued. Well, we're now going to circle back to just what those exigent circumstances were.
On May 27th, Judge Boyce issued an order in the destruction case, stating that the case was stayed because, quote, at this time, the defendant is not competent to proceed. Per the order, on March 8th of 2021, the court, under seal, which means it's not publicly available and usually pertains to confidential or sensitive information, entered an order for competency evaluation. Means brought Lori's fitness to proceed into question. A psychological assessment prepared by a licensed clinical psychologist performed the assessment and states that Lori is not fit to proceed. They also recommended restorative treatment. Rob Wood is contesting the findings in the report. The court will be scheduling a hearing, and because Lori and Chad are being tried together, the entire case is stayed, not just Lori.
So after the stay was filed on the destruction case, stays were filed in the obstruction and murder cases as well. We know that Lori's family questioned her mental health because she had been embracing new beliefs, And we'll get more into that in a moment. But it's also been just a second since we've talked about Charles coming back from that business trip where she locked him out. And there was a series of events which called into question whether she was sane.
Yeah, and we really deep dove into it during our episode of Sinister Love, but just to touch on it, there is some body cam footage of Charles Vallow from January 2019, and it is hard to watch it because he has so much feeling. You know, like, and you feel for him. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're going through this. But he's talking about her religious beliefs and how he's really worried about her and also for his life. And something about how she said she could murder him. He talks about the ordeal of coming home from Texas and how she had canceled the flight. And then here's a quote that he says, I don't know what she's going to do to them. I don't know if she's going to flee with them, if she's going to hurt them. And that's him talking about the kids, what Lori may do to the children. So he had reason to believe that she was going to do something crazy then. That's the night the officers helped him break into the house through the garage door to the house so that he could get in. And this is also when they started discussing the emergency mental health petition because he really thought she needs help. So there's also body cam footage of Lori. And this is the one that was taken at the police station. And again, this is part of that ordeal where Charles had taken her purse and phone and the sergeant was going to look at the mental health petition just to paint a picture of what was going on. The officer gives her information for something called Community Bridges, where she should get the mental health evaluation, right? And he suggested that Lori contact them or just go up there. And she's trying to figure out like why and how Charles was able to get this petition. And he talks about, you know, they might hold you just to evaluate you. But here's where I got a little upset. He says, just talking to you, I don't see you being a danger to yourself or anyone else.
During this time, wasn't she also saying like, oh, I found out he was having an affair and this is his response?
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah. He's just like, I think you're okay. And I just feel like he shouldn't have because he didn't know the full story. You know, he's listening to one story when there's two sides of a story. And I wish that he could have done a little bit better here. And then he also says, if you're still here once approved, we'll take you to CBI, meaning Community Bridges. He also mentioned how to avoid it. And this is where I was like, what? Why are you doing this? If there's a petition that is granted, why are you telling this woman how to avoid having to get this mental health check, right?
So one might say that she did not seem like she was not in control.
Definitely. She can hold it together when she needs to, right?
And so at this point, she still has a belief system where she believes that humans are zombies. And just as a reminder, zombies are when humans are possessed by a dark spirit, dark entity.
Yeah, like they're no longer themselves, that someone has taken over. And at this point in time, she believed that Charles was no longer Charles. He was either Ned Schneider or Nick Schneider. Depending on the person you talk to, it's one or the other. And yeah, he says, you know, if an officer comes to your door, talk to them through the door. Just don't open the door if you don't really want to go. So they also joke about it a little bit. And Tylee even says something along the lines of, you're going to be in a padded room. But it was obviously a joke because they were all joking around, which again, you shouldn't, I just feel like that's in poor taste to be joking while at a police station. I don't know. So in the incident/investigation report from Gilbert PD, it shows that Tylee and a redacted name, it said that Melanie was there. So I assume it's Melanie, that both of them stated that they would not leave Lori tonight until she had this done. And then they said that they would follow up February 1st, 2019. Lori Vallow did end up going for her mental health evaluation, and it was willingly, and she was released the same day. So if they had any sort of inclination that something was wrong, I feel like they would have done the whole hold, which I believe was 72 hours, but they released her the same day.
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard.
And this was back a while back. This isn't new.
Yeah. So let's talk about Melanie Gibb's interview with Nate Eaton about their belief system. This isn't anything new, but we're trying to pull all of the times where there's a collective like, what the fuck, with her and how it was handled. So per Melanie, Lori and Chad's goal was to get rid of zombies before the tribulations came upon them. And the way they would do this was they had a special prayer, and they believed it was effective because they would check their portal after and see how many died, and then they would know. There's a lot to unpack there.
Right. And here's the one thing that stands out to me is Melanie knew that they were wanting to kill zombies, right? And then later on, when Lori says at different points in time that Tylee's a zombie and that JJ are zombies, she didn't think, what does she do to zombies?
Exactly. And when we talk about this belief system, it's known by her, right? It's not a surprise.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so Melanie said that she didn't know Charles died until 4 days after and when Laurie called her.
And this, I now with things that have come to light too, I absolutely believe that this is incorrect and that she knew what was coming. That's my opinion though.
Yeah. And so the Nate Eaton interview was broken into 3 parts. And in the second part, Melanie talks about her discussion with Lori about her mental health evaluation. Melanie was waiting outside and she saw that Lori got out pretty quickly. And Lori had told her that when she went in, they took her into a back room, asked her all types of questions, and she didn't give a lot of detail. And Melanie says that she probably also wouldn't want to know the detail, but she knows plenty of detail. And she wasn't evaluated as mentally ill. And Lori told Melanie that she was fine and not mentally ill.
And yeah, in the interview, and then Nate's like, well, do you think she was honest about all of the things, like her religious beliefs, all of it?
Yeah. Well, and she says, I should have asked her, but I didn't. So here's my take. She either told them and they were cool with it, or she didn't tell them because she was mentally competent enough to know that your average person is going to hear this and go, something's not right. This isn't right, and hold her. So she was either smart enough to manipulate them or mentally competent when she gave this set of beliefs. But it's hard for me to believe that she could say, I'm zombie hunting, and them go, have a great time.
Yeah. I believe she held back.
Yeah. If she's mentally competent enough to lie to them so that they don't stop her from doing what she's going to do, then she's mentally competent enough to be able to stand trial for what she did as a result.
Agreed.
And I also, one of the things that I think is interesting is, so when we talk about like why we think she's a little out there, it's the troubling belief system that they espouse was used by the prosecution, right? And that was used in the furtherance of the conspiracy to commit murders. But I wonder if the defense will be using that same troublesome ideology to argue that the belief system is that of a person who is mentally not competent.
But in that sense, this evaluation happened during her current beliefs. So it's out there that she passed it then with those same beliefs. I don't feel like it should continue on.
Yeah.
Couldn't they theoretically say, though, like, since then, maybe she wasn't crazy when she did all of these things, but now the grief is catching up with her and maybe she is going a little crazy after losing a lot of her loved ones?
Even if it was grief that got her to a current mental state where she's not mentally competent, I don't really believe that because there's all those beautiful wedding photos of her happy and smiling in Hawaii. And that doesn't look like a person who's grief-stricken to me. And is grief-stricken so much that they're not mentally competent.
Okay. Well, and so she lost her kids, right? She didn't really care about Charles. It seems like she didn't really care about the kids. Maybe hanging on to little strings. She cared a lot about Alex. But I guess, in my opinion, she killed him, so she can't really care that much. So many different things that they could play. Maybe just living in jail, maybe made her off. I don't know, but I definitely don't believe it.
Prison and or jail can have serious ramifications for a person's personality and mental health. But if they were handing out continuances for mental competence based on people who were having a rough time in jail or prison, we'd have a lot more continuances. So on May 27th, Fox 10 and Justin Lum released an interview with Zach Cox. And this is the first time we've gotten a really robust and detailed account of what he experienced with Laurie. Just as a reminder for the wild ride that is all of the people in this case, Zach is Laurie's brother Adam's son.
I'll just kind of summarize a bit of what he talked about because it was a pretty lengthy interview. It was with Justin Lum and him, like a Zoom meeting. And as you're watching it, it made me tear up a couple times because you see how many people he's lost to. So he does talk about how Laurie and Charles and the kids were a second family to him because he lived with them for such a long time. He lived with them in 2018, so from January to May. And then he went home for summer, back to his father. And then he returned around September and stayed again through January 2019 until what he says everything snapped. And Justin Lum's like, so how was it living with them? And he, kind of talks about it. And he talks about how like Laurie would discuss her Chad Daybell books and other controversial books and even Julie Rowe stuff. he felt like she was saying very strange things about evil spirits, but he's like, it's just Aunt Lori. And then after some time, he had moved in and he would help with JJ, especially while Charles was on trips. And Lori would spend a lot of time in the temple. He said sometimes up to 8 hours a day, and she even worked there once a week. And then he also commented when she would drive, she wouldn't listen to music anymore. She'd only listen to things like Julie Rowe podcasts and other, religious podcasts in that realm. And then he also says that she said that she didn't need to eat or go to the bathroom and she was invincible. He says that was around January of 2019. And that's also when she had kicked Charles out. And that's around the time that Zach left. So remember when Charles was trying to get into the house? Zach did still have a room there, but he had left to stay with his grandparents. And he kind of talks about how that whole week went. He also talks about how Lori said that Charles was dead and he had a zombie living in him, and he calls him Ned Schneider. So Nick or Ned, up in the air. And he talks about how his family, the Cox side of the family, was told not to answer to Charles because he had been cheating. And unfortunately, they didn't hear his side of the story. They just went, and that kind of makes sense. It's Lori's family. Of course, they're going to side with Lori. So it was kind of a no-no to talk to Charles at this time. And so he essentially was getting in trouble for talking to Charles from his side of the family. I mean, and think about it, that's like his uncle still.
That's very strange.
Zach also at one point saw one of the past life documents because Lori asked him to text her a picture of something that she had left on the printer. He discusses who Chad Daybell was in his eyes. He thought it was just some author that Lori and Alex both liked, and he didn't really know that they met up with him. And at one point, and he calls Alex Al, so if I say Al at all, it's because that's what he calls him. But he says at one point, Alex gave him one of Chad's books, right? And says, I'll give you $100 to read it. And they totally bought in that this was a true story. And he also talks about, Alex. And he's like, well, he was a very weird guy and he was very easy to manipulate. From the outside looking in, like all of us already kind of knew that, right? That Lori could make him do whatever she wanted. Lori said to Alex at one point that she had talked to Jesus face to face. And he had mentioned this to the bishop. And the bishop's like, that's an awesome experience, but seems strange. Again, this is Zach's point of view, so I doubt he was in the room or anything, but this is just what he's heard.
Is that not like the bishop equivalent of cool story, bro?
Right, exactly. And she would get upset when Alex would run around and tell other people about her belief system. So again, when you were saying like she knows when to keep it secret, why else would she be getting mad when he's talking to someone about what she believes? So at one point, Zach went home to pack up his things. He's like, I'm going to stay with my grandparents. There's issues happening. And this is when Charles was on his way home from Texas, or trying to get home from Texas. And Tylee's like, hey, Zach, why don't you come with me to go pick up JJ and we'll go do something fun with him? And he's like, yep, because, they were cousins, but they treated each other similar to siblings. And so what they did in this, it just made me happy that they had a good day. But they went and picked him up. Then they went to Freddy's and they went and saw a movie. And JJ, I guess, played in the little kid area. So they all had a good time. When he got back, he packed up his car, he went and he stayed with his grandparents, and he says he got there around 7:30 p.m. When he got there, though, he says he just plugged in his phone and went to bed. Like he knew that things were up and it was stressful, so he was just over it. And it makes me sad that he's like, I regret not calling Charles and telling him what was going on and that Lori was going nuts, because this is, again, when he was trying to come back from Texas, the cancellation nonsense, all of that. I guess while he was out with the kids, Lori had Melanie Gibb come over, and that's where they moved all of like Charles's stuff. And apparently they just hid it all behind all of her food storage in boxes. But remember, Melanie doesn't know that Lori was doing anything crazy most of the time, right? She is fit for trial.
Whether or not she thinks that she's doing the world a service, she seems, throughout all of this, to have been very aware that what she was doing was outside of what was socially acceptable or moral on a larger scale in the world she lived in, not just her group of people. Like, she understood that it wasn't going to be accepted by other people.
She is fit for trial. So I want to kind of pivot from like Lori to her family. So Barry and Janice Cox, those are Lori's parents. Zach was staying with them, when he left her house. Justin Lum's like, tell me a little bit about them. He says he was in a very tough situation because the Cox family essentially hated Charles. And it was only him and Brandon, and of course his father, that were still communicating with Charles at this time. And if anyone found out, they would be upset. So he says Brandon really didn't have a lot of opportunity to talk to Charles because he was with Melanie Boudreau, who's, her Lori Vallow's niece, not Melanie Gibb. Two Melanies here. And she was almost like monitoring him in a sense. And so he said that he would always talk to Charles when he'd like go out so that he could delete text, which is really sad. And just at one point too, when I guess he mentioned that he was going to go see Charles and JJ, his grandma knew and she texted Lori. This is when Lori went on her little excursion. He saw his grandma's phone and it said, "Hey, Zach is going to see Charles and JJ. Just wanted to give you a heads up." They were like reporting things to Lori. And the reason I bring this up is because later on in the interview, he says him and his dad, until Alex Cox died, were worried that one day they were going to wake up to Alex being there to kill them.
Blink, blink, blink.
So they lived in fear because they knew that all this crazy stuff was happening and that Lori knew that they had been talking to Charles. And so, yeah, like the whole Cox family's just reporting it to her, everything that they did. I want to just touch on when Charles died. No one told Zach that he had died. Even Zach's dad had come to visit and they were staying in Summer's house, which is Lori's sister. And he says his dad flew out on a Wednesday night. Thursday morning is when Charles was killed, just to put the picture in there. On Friday, they were like, this is weird. We're not getting responses from Charles. And he also had texted Colby and Alex at one point, and they also did not respond to him. So then Charles was murdered on Thursday. Saturday, they drove up to Tucson to see one of his dad's friends. During the drive, they talked about how maybe something happened to Charles. So when they got to the friend's house, the friend's like, well, give me Charles's name. Let's Google him. That's how they found out Charles died. A Google search. Zach says his heart dropped, and this is one of the parts where I'm like, I feel so bad for Zach. Here's a quote from him. "If Charles really hit Al with a baseball bat, Al would be dead. I mean, Al would be seriously injured, not able to shoot a gun. He wouldn't have a tiny scratch on the back of his head." And that's something we've all thought about, right? Because Charles was a big guy. Like he had played baseball before. He definitely would have hurt him a lot more. He also talked to Kay that day, and no one believed that story, obviously. And he questions the scene and the investigation done for Charles there, because think about it. If they had taken that seriously and not just been like, self-defense, cool, move to Rexford, do whatever you want, think of all the things that could have been done differently. Lori had convinced the family at this point, too, that Zach, his father, Brandon, and Charles were all conspiring against her for insurance money. And he put it together that everything she kept saying Charles is doing is kind of what she was doing, because she's like, Charles is cheating on me. She was cheating on Charles, at least emotionally, right? With Chad at this time. These guys are trying to get my insurance money. She killed Charles to get insurance money. Again, it hasn't been tried yet, but that's my opinion. Exactly. This is the part where it makes me really sad because Zach did tear up talking about Tylee. Justin pretty much asks him about what did Tylee have to say about Charles's death. And he talks about the last time he saw Tylee. And it was on his way back from Tucson. He went to his grandparents' house. Tylee was there. It sounds like everyone was just fighting with the grandparents. Him and his father. Essentially, they ended up kicking him out. And that's when he moved back to Kansas to be with his father because they kicked him out. And before they actually left, he says that he was scared of Lori and Alex and stayed up all night before they flew out. So Tylee was in the kitchen crying to her grandma, so Janice. Janice was hugging her, and Tylee was getting ready to leave. He says Tylee was very boisterous, and if she had something to say, she sure as heck would have, right? And what he meant by that is she really thought that Zach and everyone was doing something wrong. She probably would have been like, and you, like, you're doing this. That wasn't the case. As Tylee was walking out, Zach says that he could tell that she wanted to say something to him. And again, this is where he's crying, and it just made me tear up. He believed that she wanted to talk about what happened. While she started to walk out, she kind of turned towards Zach. And then her grandma sort of guided her by her shoulders out the door instead. And that was the last time he saw Tylee. That breaks my heart because, he didn't know that he didn't have another minute with her. He would have, rushed out the door.
That makes me so mad.
One other thing that he mentioned that I didn't really think about before is where was Charles's phone right after he passed? Apparently, Lori had it.
And what's interesting, too, with that is Annie Cushing's live video that we talked about in our previous True Crime Digest that's up on YouTube. One of the things that she's looking for throughout the video is she's looking for Joseph's phone. And so I think that's an interesting question when you think about them together, that there seems to be at least a little bit of a pattern with where are their cell phones. Are they with Lori?
Yeah. And I guess Lori, what Zach suspects is that she had taken the phone and she had it for a couple days. And he believes that she was deleting messages because Charles had texted Zach's father to come down and chat with Lori and to record the conversation and share it with a bishop in hopes of getting her excommunicated. Because then he thought if she's excommunicated, then maybe this will stop her thinking and like get her away. That was Charles's hope. Yeah. And so he pretty much says like the whole family blocked him and he had no contact with them after all of this. And no one ever even asked him or his father's side. And then this is also where he was like, we were always worried that Alex was going to come and kill us. And anyone against Lori seemed to die. So he's like, Charles died. Brandon was shot at. We were the next on that list. It just broke my heart because, you know, he is a young guy. And like, can you imagine going through this with your family and then people that you grew up with and almost thought of as siblings dies to your aunt? And just the emotion when he talked, it got me a couple times.
So that's what we've got for the obstruction, destruction, and murder cases. It's been a big month for the Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell case. So we normally have our True Crime Digest the beginning of each month. And so we decided to release this sooner because of all of these very exciting updates. But our normal True Crime Digest will be coming out on Friday. It's going to be a little bit shorter because we put so much into this and we're only two humans.
So if you don't follow us on social media already, check us out because we also do post things as they're happening. So when the murder charges came through, we posted it pretty quick because it takes a bit to get this out to you guys. So if you want up-to-date information, sometimes we'll be posting it on there. During our outro, we'll list all of our links.
Yeah, and then as a 7,000th plug for our website, head over to truecreeps.com/Daybell and you'll find a timeline and our list of players in the case. And with that, have a good day.
Thanks for creeping with us.
Thanks for listening. For more information on our sources, please visit our website, truecreeps.com.
If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can follow us on Instagram at TrueCreepsPod, on Facebook at facebook.com/TrueCreepsPod, and on Twitter at TrueCreeps.
We'd love for you to keep creeping with us. So if you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, review, and share the show with your fellow creeps.